Welcome to Democracy Dialogues Inside the Ballot Box. Our program will educate you how ballots are processed before, during, and after elections, and provide transparency and build confidence in the voting process. I'm April Secura, President of the League of Women Voters in Northern Portage County. I have some good news and some bad news. The bad news, even in high turnout elections, 1/3 of eligible voters in the United States do not participate. The good news, in the 2020 presidential election here in Ohio, 6 million votes were cast. Only 27 were found to be fraudulent. That's 0.00005% of the statewide vote. So that's not too bad for Ohio. Facts like these are important to the League. The League of Women Voters has stood for 104 years as a trusted, nonpartisan source of election information for voters across the nation. We are dedicated to protecting and expanding voting rights, providing voter education, and making voter registration available to all eligible voters. While there is much political discord on many issues, League works to fight back against false information to ensure our elections are fair. Voting empowers us to elect candidates who address the political and societal issues that advance the common good for all of us. We urge all eligible voters to cast an educated vote on November 5th or by mail-in ballot to ensure our democracy reflects the will of the people. Our goal tonight is to engage in an informative and productive discussion. A few ground rules: please be attentive and respectful. We will provide the panel with questions to get the discussion started. The audience can submit questions written down on note cards provided by the runners. Questions will be reviewed before giving to the panel. And please silence your phones. Before we start, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time out to be here. Thank you to the Hayden Auditorium for providing this venue. And thank you to our panelists for sharing their knowledge. And from me, I would like to very much thank the members of the Northern Portage County League who planned this event, Raji Alati, Margaret Lading, and Janice Simmons-Mortimer. Janice is our League Vice President and creator of Democracy Dialogues. Here she is to introduce the panel.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again for coming. So I'm going to introduce Doug Brattebo. He is a professor of political science here at Hiram College. He teaches courses on the American political institutions, constitutional, international, and environmental law, and the science of human happiness. He has published widely on the American presidents, the presidency, and policymaking. He leads a study-away course to the Pacific Coast called Ancient Forests and Great Trees. Professor Brattebo holds a PhD from the University of Maryland in College Park and a JD from Georgetown University Law School. He's joined Terrie Nielsen. Terrie's the Deputy Director of the Portage County Board of Elections. She has served in that role for over 9 years, or, and by my count, that's 25 election cycles, kind of like dog years. But prior to being Deputy Director, she was also a poll worker for the prior 9 years to that. She's an attorney, having spent time working in law firms in both Cleveland and Akron. Her other professional experience includes working as a project administrator for West Inning, but more importantly, being right here at Hiram College, where she worked at Weekend College and the Office of Graduate Studies. So thank you both for coming, and you may begin your conversation.
Good evening, folks. Welcome. Thanks for taking some of your time this evening to be part of this conversation. So I have about 5 areas that I'm going to throw some questions to Terrie about, and then after we've had a sort of discussion here, you'll have an opportunity to submit some questions about anything that you'd like to ask about as well. Terrie, I guess I'd like to start by asking about the ballots themselves tonight. And if someone is wondering, as a citizen, how would they get onto the ballot for a particular race, say a local race of one kind or another, maybe the school board, to run to become a trustee, to join the city council, how does a person go about doing that?
So generally speaking, they would have to submit to the Board of Elections a petition to become a candidate. That petition has to have signatures from people in the community. So let's say for sake of discussion, it was somebody who wanted to run for Portage County Commissioner or the sheriff or the engineer. Those individuals have a form that they fill out and they obtain signatures. They need to obtain, I believe it's 50 valid signatures. So a valid signature is a signature signed by somebody who is registered to vote in Portage County. If you want to be on the school board, for example, the number of signatures needed varies depending upon the size of the school district. So if you are running in like Crestwood Local School District or Garfield Local School District, you need to have 25 valid signatures, and for those signatures to be valid, they would have to be somebody who lived in that school district and were registered to vote. For cities, the number of signatures varies depending upon how many people live in that city school district. Those forms are filed with our office. There is a fee associated with that. Generally, the most that fee is somewhere around $80, so it's not a very large sum of money. Those petitions are reviewed by our office. So we're looking for a number of things. One is we want to make sure that the form is filled out properly and all of the appropriate information is on there. When a person comes into our office, we go through the form with them. We give them a sample so they have an idea of what they need to put on the form. Sadly, people don't listen to us. And there are lots of people who don't make it on the ballot because they don't fill out the form properly. It's not a trick. They're not hard forms. They just have issues filling them out. And then we check the signatures. So if I'm not allowed to sign petitions because our office reviews them, but let's assume that you signed a petition. We would look Mr. Brattebo up in our voter registration system, make sure that he's registered. Make sure that the address that you put on the petition is actually where you're registered. And make sure that the signature matches what we have in our voter registration system. Once those petitions are checked and we have right signatures and the form is filled out properly, they go to the board. And the board is the one who rules as to whether or not somebody will be on the ballot. And generally speaking, if you filled out your form and you got all your signatures, then you are going to be on the ballot.
Okay, great. And when the ballot is established, where and how does the printing of the ballot take place? And is there a way to be certain that somehow extra ballots will not be sneaked into the process somewhere or printed out there outside of an official channel?
Okay, so ballots are for in-office voting. When people come to our office and vote early during our early voting hours, they're printed as the person comes up. So if you're a Hiram Village person, you come in, we check you in, we check your, you give us your ID, we check all of that, and then we print a ballot for you. For absentee ballots in the mail, those are also printed in-house, which we are, obviously, the ballot is not completed for the November election yet. We are in the proofreading process, actually waiting for the Ohio Supreme Court to decide what they're going to do about the language for issue 1. But it's a very arduous process where we read the ballot over and over and over again to make sure that there are no errors. Ballots are printed on stock that comes from our voter system company, so ES&S, Election Security and Systems. So the paper is very specific. It's a specific size. Generally speaking, our ballots are they're 17 inches plus 1 inch for a stub, so they have a perforated stub. This is not paper that you can go to Kinko's and buy. In addition to that, if you notice next time you pull a ballot, there are all of these marks all the way around the edges. Those, we call them timing marks. Those timing marks are associated with a number of different things, and they're specific to the ballot. And if you were to just print random ballots and they somehow ended up with us, which couldn't happen, and I'll explain that, they wouldn't run through our scanners. And so none of those votes would be tallied because they're not on appropriate paper. For election day ballots, we have to go out to bid. We have very specific requirements for the ballot companies. We only use printers who are within the state of Ohio. That used to be a statutory requirement. It is no longer, but we feel that we need to get our ballots from someplace within the state of Ohio. So competitive bid, that happens usually in January. We send to that company PDFs of all of the ballots that need to be printed. Those ballots come, once they get them in whatever format they put them in, they come back to us. And the directors, myself and the other director, we verify each and every one of them. They all come with stub numbers and they have barcodes on them. All of those barcodes are tested before we go to the printer and say, okay, these are good to go. And we tell them the quantities. So the quantities are based upon a formula set forth by the Ohio Secretary of State's office. You take the number of registered voters, multiply that by 1%, and then you look at how many provisional ballots you had over the last 3 like elections. You add that number to that. We always have plenty of ballots. So once we get those ballots delivered to us, generally about a week before the election, those packets of ballots are reviewed to make sure that all of the information is there front and back. We also test the barcodes again. We make sure the quantities are correct and that every precinct, every split has the appropriate number of ballots.
Okay, we'll talk more in just a little bit about the voting process, but a question I wanted to ask at this point had to do with the way that individuals fill out their ballots. A question that some people have asked on campuses: why can't they vote with a magic marker or a crayon or, I don't know, glitter glue or something? Why must it be the pen for the process?
So all ballots go through an optical scan device, and the optical scan device is picky. And so if you use a marker, the problem with a marker or a Sharpie is that it will bleed onto both sides. And so when it goes through the scanner, the machine does not know who you voted for because it has bled. If you use a red pen or a pencil or a crayon might work, but don't try it. It'll gum up the works. But it just can't, the machine can't read the ballot. And so with our optical scan ballots, each ballot is, we have a digital image of those ballots. So I think that answers your question.
Okay, and a couple questions in the next area are on sort of voter privacy. And one is, who can see how one votes, if anyone else can see it? Do elections officials themselves know, for instance, who a voter would vote for? And then relatedly, to what extent is one's party affiliation, party registration, to what extent is that public information?
So I'm going to answer your second question first. So party affiliation is public. You do not register as a whatever, Democrat or Republican or Libertarian. You choose your party affiliation based upon the type of ballot you pull in a primary election. If you don't want party affiliation, then you're going to ask for an issues-only ballot. And there is no party affiliation associated with that. So that's, and you can't change it any other way than the next election you pull a different kind of ballot. That's the only way to change your party affiliation. Unless, of course, you decide that you don't want to have party affiliation, then for 2 elections you would pull an issues-only ballot, or unfortunately you would not vote. And because your party affiliation can drop off. Your first question?
The first question
Oh,
was...
secrecy.
Yeah, secrecy.
Okay, so I'm going to be real honest. We don't care. We really don't care how you vote. We just care that you do vote. So when you, there are a lot of different ways. So let's take a mail ballot, for example. You send us an application. We send you a ballot. On that ballot is a stub number. And that stub number is assigned to you. So in our voter registration system, we know that we sent you a ballot. Our voter registration tells us your stub number. It tells you when we got your application. It tells us when we sent you a ballot. It also tells us when the ballot comes back. If a ballot comes back to us and it does not have the stub still attached to it, it will not be counted. Because we need to verify that that ballot, your ballot, came back in your ID envelope. Once we verify all of the information on the ID envelope, your ID, your signature, make sure then the ballot gets separated from the ID envelope. Now we have lots of reports that we check to make sure that we got this stub number that is attached to this voter back. Once we verify that count, double count, then the stub is separated from the ballot. Once the stub is separated from the ballot, your ballot is secret. There's no way to put them back together again. Because the stub, the number of the ballot is only on the stub. It's not on the ballot itself. So those numbers are separate. There's just no way to tell. And it's very similar when you go to vote on election day. If you are a regular voter, by that I mean not a provisional voter, they'll check your ID, check and see if that you're in our electronic poll book. If they find you, they'll scan the barcode on the bottom of the ballot, so that number is attached to you in our electronic voting, in our electronic poll book. Then that stub is removed. Put in it goes in a little, like a trash bag. Comes back to our office. So you're automatically separated. There's no way for anybody to know how you voted. And like I said, we don't care. I mean, we're processing thousands and thousands and thousands of ballots. We just want you to vote.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask you a little bit about voting machines. To wit, what happens to a ballot once the person feeds it into the machine scans it? And related to that, can the machine have a problem scanning a particular ballot? And if so, what happens and how do we know that there is a problem and how is the problem addressed?
Okay. So first of all of the election equipment in the state of Ohio, every single county, all of those machines are certified federally and by the Secretary of State's office. Every single one of them. The other thing that happens, and we'll be doing this in a couple of weeks, is we do logic and accuracy testing. So we take the ballots for this upcoming election, we pre-mark them so we know what the results need to be, and we test every single piece of equipment that goes out on election day. If there's a problem with that particular machine, we pull it to the side, and we have a technician, one of our vendors, technicians will be there during logic and accuracy testing. If the machine gets fixed, then we logic and accuracy test it again. Everything gets checked before it goes out. Now, once your ballot goes in, it gets scanned, and then in the bottom of they're called DS200s. At the bottom of the DS200 is a bin where the ballots fall. At the end of the night on election night, those ballot boxes are locked, secured with security tape, and they come back to our office.
Okay. So another question I wanted to ask about the machines is, what about this concern that we hear people mention from time to time about their fear that maybe somehow a voting machine could be hacked into, or that a voting machine could be manipulated in one way or another?
So each year, all of the election equipment companies will provide a machine to a group of hackers, and to see how and if those machines can be hacked into. First of all, none of our election equipment is connected to the internet. Never happens. The votes are captured on a flash drive. That's where all of the images are. Those come back to our office, and that's what we put into our electionware system to come up with the tabulation of the votes.
In terms of the potential for hacking.
Gotcha. So when they took these pieces of equipment, and they do this annually, it would take somebody a very long time to hack it, if they're able to, which would mean that you would have to be sitting there with an iPad or a computer. Well, there's no way that's going to happen. Anybody who's been a poll worker would be like, excuse me, what's going on? And the machines are never in a place where they are not, just like in our office, they're double locked and double keyed. I have a key, the Republican has a key. Anytime the machines are set up, programmed, tested, there's a Democrat and Republican there. It's always a bipartisan team. It's just not a thing. We do so much testing that it's just not, we are very confident in our machines, as are all counties in the state.
One last question on the voting machines. There was sort of a controversy about a particular manufacturer of voting machines, Dominion voting machines. I wonder if you could describe that controversy to us. And also, are those machines even used, say, in Portage County, for example?
So the controversy was that there were people that were claiming that when people were voting, so Dominion's machines are touch screens. So they were claiming that when people would touch, whatever, let's say they voted for dog catcher, John Smith for dog catcher, that it was automatically changing the vote to whoever the competitor is. Well, those machines are all tested, so that doesn't happen. That's not something, no board of elections would ever send out a machine where that happened, that they were aware that happened. And so there were people who I would say were not credible, who were saying that those machines could be hacked. But again, they are connected to the internet. And so much ado was made about it without any actual evidence. And I think that's important. Listen, if you have a question about what happens in an election or a process, don't just assume that the information that you're seeing in the media or on social networks or just talking to whatever, a friend or at an event, that is in fact true. Call our office. I am certified federally to be an election administrator, as is the other director. We take our jobs very seriously, and we would be more than happy to talk to anybody about any of the fringe or crazy or whatever you want to call it, information that's out there. So Dominion actually filed a lawsuit against, I think it was Fox News, and won millions of dollars for defamation, which again is proof that the information that was out there, that people were passing, was not credible. But there are a lot of people out there who potentially don't know the questions to ask, or where to go to ask the questions to get the correct information. Now you asked me if Dominion equipment was ever used in Portage County, and yes it was. So from 2020 through 2015, we had Dominion touchscreen machines. Never had a problem.
Okay. All right, thank you. So the next area that I want to ask you a few questions about is the registration and the election day process itself. And I'll begin with the registration piece. What is the deadline for registering to vote in Ohio, and what does it take to register to vote in Ohio? What if someone just shows up and does nothing, and they show up on election day and they want to cast a ballot, but they've taken no steps prior to that time?
Okay, so generally speaking, the voter registration deadline is approximately 30 days before the election. So for the November election, the deadline is October 7th. Our office is open from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. on that day to take voter registrations. Voter registration, our office is not the only place that you can register to vote. You can register to vote at any public library, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, the Department of the Treasurer's Department, or you can go online to voteohio.gov and register online. What you need to register to vote is you need to answer the first two questions. 1, am I a U.S. citizen? 2, will I be 18 years or older by election day, by the general election date? You put your name, you put your address, you put your date of birth, you put a form of ID. It's either the last 4 of your social or your driver's license number, and you sign it. It's not hard. You should know the answers to all those questions. Now, if somebody shows up on election day and they've done nothing, our cardinal rule is if you want to vote, we'll let you vote. If you're not in our electronic poll books, you will be a provisional voter. A provisional voter is simply they get the same ballot. You fill out the top of the form, name, address. You'll have to show an appropriate form of identification for a provisional. So a driver's license, a military ID, a passport. and you sign that, put your ballot inside. That comes back to our office, where we will get on the statewide voter database to see if you are registered anywhere else in the state of Ohio. If you are registered somewhere in the state of Ohio and you fill all the information on the form, from the form out properly, your ballot will likely count.
Okay, thank you very much. So if I have requested a ballot to be returned by mail, but I decide for whatever reason that I'm not going to use it, maybe I don't want to mail it, I feel insecure about the mail, and I decide in person that I want to show up and vote in person on election day. Maybe I've even brought my mail ballot with me and I'm like, hello, I'm here to vote, I've decided not to use the mail ballot. What happens in that particular situation?
So that voter would be a provisional voter. The electronic poll books indicate on there that the person has requested an absentee ballot, and we've sent them an absentee ballot. If we sent you an absentee ballot, you're a provisional voter. You may not turn in your mail ballot at a polling location. If you are uncomfortable with the mail, we have a drop box in our parking lot. They're 24/7. Just drop it off. One of the things that sometimes happens is people will vote their absentee ballot and then they show up on election day and vote again. And they're voting a provisional ballot because they're marked absentee. So we investigate each one of those persons to see, first we would check to see if their absentee ballot came back to us. If the absentee ballot came back to us, the provisional forms all filled out correctly, it's likely their vote will count. If, however, they've returned an absentee ballot to us, and they did a provisional, generally speaking, those people get referred to the prosecutor's office because it is illegal to attempt to vote more than once.
Okay, so a related question, a slightly different wrinkle would be, in the case of a voter who has voted early in person but then shows up, what does the process of verification look like there? I guess, to put it one way, is the polling place aware of the person's first early vote?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's in their electronic poll book. There'll be a notation that says absentee, and those people are required to vote a provisional ballot.
Okay, so the last area that I wanted to ask you about, a series of several questions, is about the results, the tabulation of results, the actual counting of ballots and the like. And I guess the first one may sound odd, but it is sometimes the object of various conspiracist types of theories out there. What happens to unused ballots if there are extra ballots? What becomes of them? How are they secured, and what ultimately is done with them?
So all ballots come back to our office, voted, unvoted. They come back to us in locked containers. Depending on the type of election, all voted and unvoted voted ballots are maintained by our office. If it's a federal election, for 22 months. If it is a state or an off-year election, so odd number of years, they need to be retained for 81 days. They don't get thrown. And then we have to have them shredded.
Okay, a couple more questions in this same area. And the first of them is, why do results take a while to come in from certain areas? And why are results in other areas calculated fairly efficiently and quickly, it seems like? What is responsible for that variance in the process?
So it's important to note that the first report that comes out on election day is usually somewhere around 8 o'clock. That report consists of all of the absentee ballots that were either voted in our office or that we receive by 7:30 p.m. on election night. So depending on if you have, certain communities are much more in favor of early voting. So that might have something to do with it, but I think a big issue is that we have polling locations all over the county. So we have one here at the field house here in Hiram. We have Wyndham, we have Aurora, we have Suffield. It takes some time to get from Suffield Church of Christ to the Ravenna, the Board of Elections in Ravenna. And what they're bringing back to us are those flash drives I mentioned. That has all the votes on it, and we have to upload that information into our election management system in order for the tabulation to be completed. Sometimes we think we keep track, of course we keep track of everything, but like I know exactly what sticks I'm waiting for. And if we're only waiting for one or two, sometimes we'll wait because we know that's the final report. But it's really a function of travel.
So a question in this area that I wanted to ask as well has to do with when people look online to check to see what the vote totals are that are on the Board of Elections website. There will be a banner there that says unofficial, right? Unofficial. So I guess A, why is that there? And then B, when does that become an official tally? And that is to ask, when is the result a certified result?
Okay, so on election day, everything is unofficial because we still have all of the provisional ballots that they don't get counted election night because we have to do the investigation that I mentioned. Additionally, people who requested an absentee ballot in the mail has to be postmarked the day before the election and must be received by the Saturday after the election. So there are always some outstanding. We're just waiting for those ballots to come back. So certification for the November election is, I believe, the 26th of November. That gives us time. So we're probably going to have somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 provisional ballots. Well, that's a lot of investigating. That's a lot of entry. And so it will take us every bit of that time to do that investigation to make sure that if somebody's ballot should count, that it will in fact count. And so we send our certification results to the Secretary of State's office, and the Secretary of State's office is the one who certifies all of the state as a whole.
Okay. I guess the last question that I would like to ask before we give you all a chance to submit questions of whatever you would like to ask would be to provide an example from my own classroom a year and a half ago or so, where a student professed that he just didn't believe elections were a real thing. He thought that he lived in a country in which elections were hoaxes, they weren't truly administered, they didn't count for anything, and I'll say a couple things. One is that there was no one else in that class who had a similar opinion. The second thing was that I thanked him for being willing to share the opinion, and I made a few points about why I thought it would be useful and important to think about that and to interrogate that view. But what would you say to those people out there? Perhaps they are young people beginning their careers as voters. They have long lives ahead of them, but yet somehow at an early stage, a few of them seem to have come to have such a perspective on things.
So that's unfortunate. I think that what I would recommend to that person is that you come to our office. So when we do logic and accuracy testing, that's open to the public. You can watch us testing the machines. I would also suggest that that person be a poll worker, because there is nothing that gives you more of an inside view on what's going on in our office and how many checks and how many balances that we have in our office than being a poll worker. Or quite frankly, just call and ask. I mean, we are always happy to have a conversation and say, listen, you know, so why do you think that? And I think a lot of times people may think that, well, my vote doesn't count. It's not going to make a difference. Which, so I've been at the Board of Elections for about 9 years, and there have been several races, whether it's a candidate race or an issue, that have won by less than 1 or 2 votes. So everybody's vote matters. It is your opportunity to think about who the candidates are. Do your research. And if you have questions about where do I look for information, call our office. We will give you the numbers of the 2 major parties and make some suggestions as far as where you can look. The League of Women Voters, vote411.org is a great place to look. I think people just need to educate themselves on what voting is about. We vote twice every year, not just November of a presidential year. And those votes are so important. In fact, in Hiram, last November, we had a write-in candidate who ran against the city mayor in here in Hiram Village, and she won. Potentially, it could only happen in a small place, but that was quite a feat, where she was able to get enough votes to take over as mayor. So it will get involved in their part. If you have a party affiliation, if you want to affiliate with a party, or you do I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do. And for sure, call our office and ask questions. Ask the hard questions. We don't mind answering the hard questions. What we do mind is when people call and yell at us because they think they know the answer, and they really do not.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right, we have this.
We'll go around, we'll keep collecting, or if you need another card, let us know.
We have a good stack of these. I will just read them as they are written. And the first question is, in a primary election, since some people choose to pull a ballot from a party they do not identify with in order to impact an outcome, what is the point of registered party members in Ohio? Simply for solicitation purposes, question mark? How many states operate this way instead of having an open ballot?
So the law in the state of Ohio is that primaries are really they're not always party races. So if you, in Portage County, the only municipality that has partisan primaries is the city of Kent. The others primary races are county-wide races. And I understand that that's people do cross party lines to vote for an opposite party. That's just the way the law is written in many states. They have what they call a closed primary. And this is something that we're hearing a little bit about in the legislature, whereby when you register to vote, you would have to pick your party affiliation at that time. Now, independent is not a party in the state of Ohio. It's not a thing. And there are some minor parties that are recognized in the state of Ohio. Right now, the only one is the Libertarian Party. Those are statutory questions that a lot of times we just follow the rules. So.
Absolutely. Here's a twofer. Someone wrote two questions. They appear not to be super closely related, maybe a little bit. The first is, do all states follow the same election procedures that Ohio does?
So, I guess I know. Some are, so the situation here in Ohio is each county can have different equipment. We have a lot of autonomy. We have to follow the statutes and we follow directives from the Secretary of State's office. Some states, like Georgia, for example, they are very top-down, where all of the election equipment is determined and chosen by the state. They're the ones who, sometimes they actually program the ballot, which would be fabulous. But, and they send it out to the local counties or however they're situated. The thing that is the constant is the testing and the double checks, triple checks, and then also the integrity of the people who work in elections. Everybody who we meet when we go to national conventions are so very passionate about what they do. And they just want to make sure that everybody who wants to vote has that opportunity.
The second question on the same card goes as follows. With all of the security measures in place, why is the Secretary of State trying to eliminate drop boxes?
So, we don't have any security problems with drop boxes. They're bolted to the ground. The only people who can get into them are people from our office, and it's always done in a bipartisan team. There's a camera on every single one of them, 24/7. I can't answer what Mr. LaRose is thinking as to why he's appears to be trying to make things more difficult for people. But I believe in part it's because he was sued by, his office was sued by a group of disabled individuals who were complaining about the rules as it related to who could put a ballot in the drop box. And I think that this is his way of flexing his muscles.
Okay, thank you. Here is the next question. Many people first register to vote when they are 18 years old. Over time, many people have a change of their signature. Do you recommend folks to update their registration, especially if one is older?
So when you fill out your voter registration card, we capture that signature. Every time you send us an absentee ballot request, or when you go to vote and you sign your name on the electronic poll book, or any other signature that you send us, we keep those. And so we know that, especially we look at a date of birth and can determine that maybe this person's signature is a victim of age. And so we take that into consideration. So we don't just have one signature. If you're a frequent voter, we'll see that your signature has changed. And sometimes people's signature will be different on their voter registration card versus like we have, if you come to our office, you sign like a pad like you would when you're signing your credit card. We realize that people's signatures are going to be different. So we provide a fair amount of leeway there.
Next question is, what happens if you were to run out of ballots?
So we have 5 ballot printers in our office. So we have a very robust ballot on demand system. At the polls, let's say a precinct receives 3 packets of ballots. The last packet of ballot will say, if you're opening this, you need to call out the Board of Elections and tell us that you're opening your last packet of ballots. And so if that were to happen, then we would print ballots for that particular precinct. We have rovers assigned to a number of polling locations throughout the county. They come to our office, they pick them up, and they take them to the polling location.
Okay, the next question is, what happens if a candidate does not have money to pay? They may have signatures.
So the statute requires that they pay a fee. And we don't have any leeway on that.
Okay, the next one I think has 4 questions on it. I admire the spirit. It sounds like perhaps this came from a student. Give them an opportunity, and there we go. All right. The first question is, if the stub is removed in the mail, can you request another ballot?
So if I understand the question, so we mailed you a ballot, and the ballot came back to us without the stub. Can you request another ballot? You could always vote a provisional ballot. And so if you vote a provisional ballot and we have a stub issue, that is something that would go to the board to make a determination. Because it's not going to count, but we have to account for everything. So we have to have that ballot, and we have to know that that stub is missing, which we would, because that's something that's part of the process.
The second question is, I believe correct, are passports valid identification for voting process?
Passports and passport cards are, yes.
Okay. Third question, will you get notified if your ballot is invalid?
So if you send us it's a mail ballot, and you send it back to us, and there's some issue with the ID envelope. You forgot to sign it, or you didn't provide us with any identification, we will send you a letter saying, hey, there's a problem here. Please fill out this form and send it back to us. If we get that form back to us by the Saturday after the election, and everything is correct, then we will count that ballot. There's also a place on our website that is primarily for absentee voters where you can go. If you go to the absentee voting tab on our website and you click check my absentee ballot, put your name in, it'll tell you when we received your application, if there was a problem with your application, when we sent your ballot, was there a problem with your ballot? So all of that information is on our website. And for provisional ballots, I think the process is you would call us, and we would, after certification, provide you with that information.
Okay, the last question on this card is, how do you ensure the, and there are quote marks, bipartisan poll workers do not work together to rig the elections?
Well, that would be a feat. So I know there's a number of people in this audience who are poll workers. So for each precinct, there are 4 poll workers, 2 Dems and 2 Rs. One person is the voting location manager. They would all have to collude in some sort of way, but it would be caught, because when the ballots come back to our office, the stubs, and if you've ever voted, you get a ticket that has your name and information on it that you turn in when you scan your ballot. We reconcile all of that. So we take the number of ballots that are sent out, the number of ballots that come back. We make sure that those numbers match, and if they don't, then we're looking at those stubs to see do we have all of the stub numbers? Do we have all of the tickets? And we cross-reference all of that to make sure that we know exactly how many people voted, because the other thing that happens is whatever is in the electronic poll books gets uploaded, and I print reports that lists all of the people who checked in on the electronic poll book. And if you were to just stuff a bunch of random ballots, there would not be a corresponding person to that. So it would be, our people are dedicated, they're great workers, they get training. It's not a worry.
Okay, thank you. Here is the next question. Can a felon vote in an election in Ohio or anywhere else in the United States?
So, in the state of Ohio, if you are convicted of a felony and you go to prison, we will remove you from the voter rolls. Once you're out of prison, you may re-register to vote. So Ohio is one of the states where people who have been convicted of a felony, so long as it's not election related, may re-register to vote. Other states have different rules. I think Ohio is probably one of the more liberal states as it relates to felons. But yeah.
Okay. Here are two questions. The first of which is, does the issue-only ballot have any candidates on it? So no way to vote candidates unless choose a party.
Only in a primary do you have to choose a party. So in November, everybody gets the same ballot. So you can pick and choose who you want to from any of the party options. And no, there are no candidates on the issues only ballot.
Second question, do I need to complete all choices on the ballot for it to be counted?
Nope. You don't have to complete any of them.
Okay.
I mean, you really don't. If you don't, yeah, it'll go through the scanner, it'll say your ballot is blank, and if you say that's cool with me, you cast your ballot and yeah, you get credit for voting. You don't have to vote for anybody.
I kind of like that one, actually. Okay. The next question is new regulations regarding absentee ballot returners for those with disabilities must go in office, question mark, not allowed rather, to use Dropbox, question mark.
So this is a new directive that we got, I think it dropped on Labor Day, because we were all at work, of course. No, I'm kidding. It just seems to be the way the SLS does things. We get directives after the close of business or on a holiday. So my understanding of the requirement is that if you are dropping your own ballot, you may drop it in a Dropbox. But if you're dropping somebody else's ballot, you're supposed to come into our office and sign an affidavit saying, I'm dropping off a relative's ballot. So we haven't looked at everything as it relates to that. But yeah, that's the current state.
Okay. Does the state of Ohio conduct a post-election audit to ensure integrity and, or it says, I guess it says integrity or accuracy?
Absolutely. It's a lot of fun. So what we do is, the Secretary of State will tell us one or two races that we have to audit, and then we pick a third. Usually it's a countywide, either issue or candidate race. We have to audit 5% of the total votes cast in that election. So we put all of the precincts in a little bowl, and our board members pick until we get to the 5% number. And then we find the ballots for those precincts. Many polling locations have multiple precincts, so the ballots have to be separated, because we are only, let's say, Hiram Township A needs to be counted, but Hiram Township B, so we have to separate the Hiram Township B and the Hiram Village ballots out. Once we get all the ballots for that particular precinct, they are hand counted by a bipartisan team. And then we verify, because we know what the results are. So we verify that what they saw in the ballot box, what ballots they counted, not only do the numbers match as far as the number of ballots, but who people voted for matches. We have, since I've been there, always 100%.
The next question is, if an absentee ballot is not received by election day, but arrives within 4 days, and the voter votes provisionally to be sure their vote counts, will they be referred for prosecution?
That depends on the board. The board's the one who decides whether or not we send people to the prosecutor's office. If that were the situation, potentially not. I don't, but it's like I said, it's the board's decision. But you did attempt to vote and to elect twice in one election, which is technically a violation of the law.
Okay. What is the Secretary of State's rights and role in certifying a vote count?
So the Secretary of State's office is not responsible nor involved in how Portage County certifies the election results. His role is certifying the statewide results. And then what he does with that is to him.
Okay. If there, this is the kind of question everyone wants to get, if there was anything you could reform with the voting and ballot processing procedure, what would it be?
We have so many choices. I think that it would be nice if everybody was automatically registered to vote. Once you turned 18, you were automatically registered to vote. It would be fabulous if we had vote by mail only. Oh my gosh. It would be great from our perspective. Because a lot of our time is spent training poll workers, giving poll workers, finding places, doing the ADA assessment of all of the places. So we're very jealous of Oregon and Washington because they are vote by mail only states.
Okay. Next question is, can I use my mobile ID to vote? I can use it at the airport, so why not?
Well, because I didn't write the statute. And when they came up with the electronic driver's license, they did not change the law, the voter ID law. And so you just can't use it. You can't use it if you get pulled over by the police either. That is not valid ID. You have to have your card. So it might sound forward-thinking, but the statute just doesn't allow that.
Last question I've received on paper, if there are any more, I'd be happy to pose a few more. Are we seeing challenges at Portage Board of Elections challenging a list of voters?
So we have received some challenges from a couple of people in the county. And for the most part, what they are is they're people that they maybe looked up on the recorder's website, not auditor's website, it looks like they sold a piece of property and they're still registered to vote at that address. Or it's a college student and they're still on the voter rolls and it's been 5 years. Are they still living at that, you know, are they still in that dorm room? So it has been our board's position that those are not valid challenges. If somebody votes at an address where they do not live, that's a problem. You always vote where you live. But these were, the challenges were just, there was no proof that the people voted at the address that they may or may not live at. We have a process whereby the voter rolls are cleaned. And that process happens every year. So if you haven't voted for, let's say, 2 presidential elections, and we'll send you, we call it a confirmation notice. If you still live there, you sign it and you send it back. If it comes back to us as undeliverable, then we make a notation on your record, now you're in confirmation status. 4 years after that, we send you another letter and say, hey, I haven't heard from you, there's been no voter activity for 4 years. If you don't do something, if you don't respond within 30 days, we're going to remove you from the voter rolls. And only then, after that 30-day period of time, are people removed from the voter rolls. So we don't remove people from the voter rolls because somebody thinks that potentially you don't live there anymore.
Okay, we've received one more question, and it is, you mentioned how Oregon and Washington have mail-in ballots only. In what other ways do you think the voting/ballot casting process may change in the future?
So there's been some testing with doing voting electronically. So we do have some groups of people that can vote electronically. But so we have UOCAVA voters, so people who are overseas and in the military, they can request a ballot, and their ballots can be emailed to them. We don't have to do snail mail because it takes forever for an envelope to get from Portage County to Greece. The issue is that once they get their ballot, they need to print it, vote it, and mail it back to us. It would be nice if there was a secure way where they could return their ballots to us electronically. Because those poor people from Greece, sometimes we get them 2 months after the election because their mail system is not fabulous. We also have an option for people who are disabled. If they have a printer, we can email them their ballot. And then they have to print it out and fill it out and send it and mail it back. So that would be nice. I think that would be, people would appreciate that. Now, obviously, most of the people who vote are generally the older age group, and so that may not fit their lifestyle. But I think many people, especially younger people, are used to doing things electronically.
So thanks very much for being willing to spend some time with us this evening. Thanks so much to the League for putting on this event. And thank you to all of you, not only for attending, but for asking what I thought really turned out to be a wonderful batch of questions. And here's to an effective and secure election process in our neck of the woods. Thank you very much.
On behalf of Women for Northern Portage County, I want to thank both of you. When we thought of the idea of democracy dialogues, it was exactly this. Being able to have a conversation about important topics and also having audience participation in a way that we can better understand what's happening with the elections process. I want to invite all of you to our next Democracy Dialogue, which will be October 22nd, talking about the Electoral College. I think this November it is going to be top of mind for all of us. So let's talk about the Electoral College. Where did it come from? Why was it a part of our system? And does it still really help our democracy or hurt it? So we'll get a location to be determined, but mark your calendar for October 22nd with our favorite professor as our host. And we hope to see you there. But thank you very much for coming out tonight. Thank you.